Eric Jager's research was absolutely critical for us, and though I must say, as you can see, if you read the book, you'll see the movie. It's very much a movie that's adapted from that book, and but interestingly enough, the centerpiece of our movie is Marguerite de Carouge, and very little it was really known about her because the men tended to write down everything they were thinking and feeling, but they didn't really. They completely overlooked and ignored the women. So Nicole really had to make up a lot of Marguerite's life based on what kind of scant facts we had, and it's a really beautiful job of inventing a human being, I thought.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, Marguerite was a challenge to write, but it was really fun to create a character, and it was also very sad to write this character, but I admired her and thought she was incredibly courageous and honest, and really honored herself and her experience, and that was really great to write.
We wanted The Last Duel to be a movie that would make people feel something. And I think that's always the goal, in particular with this movie, because it's about people who don't see or recognize even the basic humanity of others, in particular women. Not to mention at the time, the whole peasantry class and so on, a society that was so rigidly hierarchical, and that hierarchy was rooted in gender and class and ancestry, where only a very narrow slice of people had the opportunity to even advance themselves or have any kind of life where they were respected by others. We wanted to show, I think, or at least we were mindful of, the basic need to be, to actually see others for who they are, and to recognize that all human beings deserve respect and the same opportunity to flourish and care for their families and be happy. And that was denied to a whole segment of the population, and in fact in many ways continues to be much more difficult for people, is an obvious fact. So we didn't want to teach a lesson in that. We didn't think that we had discovered that. We simply want to tell a story about an extraordinary woman who did incredible things, who we think, look, you just benefit from. A great story is a great story. Her story is a great story. That it happens to be a true story makes it even better, because the audience just then knows, oh my God, this is real. This took place. And that only adds to the power of your storytelling. And really what we, I think, wanted was just to hope that it was be good, because if it was good, it would affect people and create some empathy and compassion in the audience.
We talked about the movie as kind of an anti-chivalry movie. In the sense that, or like a re-examination of chivalry, of the chivalric code, and what was interesting to us was this idea that movies in general tend to overlook women, and what if we made a movie that was from 3 different perspectives, and the first 2 were male perspectives, and the women just only existed in the male stories when they were manifested by the men to kind of, for whatever the men needed them for, whatever adulation the men needed, they could kind of manifest the women. But other than that, the women were just completely relegated to the background and completely ignored, only to flip the whole thing in the 3rd act and reveal this whole world that had been entirely overlooked. And in our headiest moments, as we were kind of conceiving it, we were thinking, well, how can we implicate the audience? Can in this, to have them think, wow, I haven't even noticed for 2 acts of this movie that these women have been entirely ignored, because I'm so acculturated myself to seeing movies like this.
The Last Duel is about chivalry and gender, and what one thinks chivalry is in this movie especially is vanity and pride and jealousy and revenge. And it's really not about protecting the woman at all. It's about winning a duel and saving face. And the Last Duel is about gender, because the females have no identity, no agency, no rights. They're property of their fathers, then they're property of their husbands, who are old enough to be their fathers. So it says a lot about, the disparity in gender. There's no gender equality.
And that's particularly kind of insidious because the chivalric code wrapped itself in the veil of, being protective of women and, putting them on this sort of ostensibly a pedestal, a sort of like they're, my daughter just read Tale of Two Cities, and we were talking about it, and she said, well, Dickens employs the classic device where he, frames the women only as these, pure symbols of nature, or, like, kind of like she's very tuned into this, the hypocrisy inherent in this. Like, you're on the one hand, you're saying, oh, well, these women are sort of elevated, they're better than us, which allows the men to feel good about the way they're treating them, when in fact, they're ignoring and undermining the very basic humanity.
In employing the different perspectives, we were very careful, and there's quite a bit of discussion around not ever turning this into a he said, she said, or a both sidesism type of. We were very clear. Ridley was very clear, and the writing team was very clear about this. The idea that everyone who sees this movie and everyone who made this movie understands that she is telling the truth. The only person who doesn't is Adam Driver's character, Jacques Legris. And to us, it was a much more interesting thing to study how somebody could do something so horrible and not realize it because of his acculturation. Salute.
Thank you.
Because of his acculturation, because of his experience and his understanding of the world, and because of the system and the culture he lived in, and because of all of the institutions validating his experience and his belief, and telling him that he could do no wrong, that he could actually do something so heinous and wrong and not even understand that he'd done it. And that was a much more interesting thing to explore than a bad mustache twisting evil person sneaking in the window and willfully committing an act that they knew was wrong.
If anybody thinks The Last Duel is a he said, she said movie, they are not looking at it carefully.
Yeah, I mean, it was so clear to us that it actually didn't even occur to us that someone might interpret it that way until we consulted with Rain and the Gina Davis Institute and people who said, are you mindful of this? And we thought, oh my gosh, of course. This is not, the idea is not to explore like, well, it could be, she could be telling the truth, she could not, and hey, question, people's realities and integrity but rather to say, it's to really examine how this profound narcissism that Matt's talking about, rooted in this case in gender and this culture and the world that was created, as well as a self-centeredness of this character, can lead one to experience, an event so differently than someone else. And is that two people can have this different experience of the same event, and yet there can only be one truth.